Welcome, everybody. Today we have with us Dr. Helen John-Kelly, who's a pediatric gastroenterologist, and she is a student in our Mastering Ayurvedic Digestion and Nutrition course program. Hi, Helen. How are you?
Good, John. How are you?
Thank you for meeting with us today and for sharing your experience in the course. I think that'll be very helpful to some of our students who are thinking about taking the program.
Of course, absolutely.
So can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. As you said, my full name is Helen John-Kelly. I'm a pediatric gastroenterologist. I trained in Children's Philadelphia almost 20-something years ago. And I was originally born in India. I grew up in Kuwait, and I live in the United States. I've sort of been a little bit of a gypsy. And here I am, almost finishing this 10-month course of Mastering Ayurvedic Nutrition and Digestion course.
And how has the course gone?
It's actually really good now. I think it was very hard to begin and start that course, not knowing and anticipating, how this would go. And I think this far along in my career, when I decided to do this course, I wasn't completely ready for the amount of work that it would take. But I have to say, I think part of that was just the nuances of trying to get on a Zoom call, the link, and I don't really Facebook, so that was a challenge for me, getting information through that. But I think those were just the little tiny hurdles that we went through. But I personally loved the course. I'm just so happy, especially knowing that I'm an allopathic physician. I've always practiced allopathic medicine, but at the same time, because of my ethnic background, I've always had Ayurveda in some form, just not knowing why we did certain things. Why did we have warm cumin water in the winter time? I just didn't know. My parents just did it. My grandparents probably did the same thing with them. And so it was really nice to tease those things out as to why we did certain things, even in our own families. And so that was very exciting. Exciting for me personally, because when I see patients in my office and they ask me, are there holistic, natural things that we can do for many of the digestive disorders that I take care of in children, I feel much better suited, I think, after doing this course, to be able to give information that I'm comfortable with. Even though I sort of knew some of that, I just wasn't completely aware of how things worked. And that was very important for me to go through this course.
Okay, so what was there? Is there a different style of thinking in Ayurveda, or how was that transition from a Western allopathic approach to the Ayurvedic approach? How would you characterize that shift?
Yeah, for sure. I think in the Western approach, it's treat the disease, right? I mean, we give an antibiotic, or you treat, or you have surgery, or you sort of treat the tip of the iceberg, if you will. And I felt that in Ayurveda, it's treating the root cause. Because yes, you can treat, sometimes you do need to treat the tip of the iceberg and take care of it, but that huge baggage that's under is what Ayurveda focuses on. And I think that is so important. It makes me realize, like, for example, even an inflammatory bowel disease, which is so complex, complicated, presents in so many different ways. There's a whole base body health that needs to be addressed versus just the bloody diarrhea, which is, the sign and the symptom that happens. Yeah. It's readdressing the digestion and, the basics of that, which makes me think very differently now, to be honest with you. Like when I see, I had a patient about 4 weeks ago. I was, I do locums physician work, and I was in Richmond, and I had a young boy with inflammatory bowel disease and had a stricture and needed to have his colon removed. But at the same time here, after talking about it, and he had to have the surgery done, unfortunately for him, but talking about basic nutrition, vitamins, and other things that he would need, because for him, this wasn't going to go away. Yes, we took out a certain part, but there's a base of health that needs to happen for him so that he would not have any more acute events, so to speak. So it made me think very differently, which I think is very good. which is
Yeah,
great.
it's very interesting when, to think about how to support a person instead of a particular condition. The how to support a whole person, or even having a model or models for that, because there are a few different ways to approach it. I noticed you mentioned nutrition, as in Western nutrition, Western nutritional approaches, and I think that Ayurveda provides a model for how to approach a person, even from a distance. And then you can do the blood tests and all things like that to find some specific things. But there's also an overall, the overall person, and approaching them, and a certain language that you can use to talk about them, that I think Ayurveda really nourishes and encourages, and it, in a way, it feels some, I would say, humanistic. That you can relate to the patient and fit thing and identify things that seem to fit well with them.
Right.
I'm using I would say almost deliberately vague language for that. But it is a little bit like that. There are some general principles of things that are going on in the client's body, and Ayurveda can shift those patterns in very simple, natural ways. And sometimes I think it's easy to overlook it because of its simplicity.
Yeah.
There's a kind of funniness there, because you expect to be learning something extremely subtle, but what you realize is that it's something extremely simple, and that gets overlooked.
Yes, absolutely. And just even using just natural things that you have in your kitchen,
Mhm.
herbs that you have in your kitchen. And
Yeah.
you don't have to necessarily go out and get the exotic kinds, but, little things like cardamom, cinnamon, you know, uh, pomegranate juice. I remember, this is almost 20 years ago, when I was training in my GI fellowship, when I was taking care of a child with inflammatory bowel disease, one of the parents said, I'm going to give some pomegranate juice to my child. And, I had no idea where this pomegranate juice and Ayurveda and a bowel disorder came into. And I sad to say, I said to this parent, oh, don't give any juice. That's going to make diarrhea even worse. It's not the best thing for this child for you to give this thing. And so ended up giving her this laundry list of foods that they should and shouldn't eat. And now I think the pomegranate juice is cooling, for your
Yeah.
intestinal tract. And so
Uh-huh.
it's a pitta disorder when you have that bloody diarrhea. And the pomegranate juice could have been, an ounce or half an ounce or whatever, that small
Yeah.
amount is actually very cooling for the body. So here I am, 20 some years fast forward. And I remember that, when I
Yeah.
told that parent not to give it. And now I'm like, oh, wow, this is actually very helpful. Things that you can find in your pantry. That's actually very healing. And I love the mantra that you always used, and was, easy to digest foods. I like that,
Uh-huh.
which is easy for digestion. And so now when I talk to even my own family, I say, okay, let's think about what's easy to digest, what's easy to eat right now. We were on the road for 5 days, and, part of my
Yeah.
family were constipated, and I was trying to explain to them, it's a vata issue, and, vata resides in the colon, and we're traveling, it's movement, it's emotion, it's,
Yeah.
it's IBS, that we would say IBS constipation, kind of thing in allopathic medicine. But there's a whole other Ayurvedic way to take care of that, which is very exciting for me personally. So
Yeah. It's something that as you study it, you realize you do it throughout the day, and you're making little shifts throughout the day, depending upon circumstance, traveling, a
right.
hard day at work, a little more stress. And that's going to change just slightly what kind of food you're going to eat that night for dinner, or quantity that you may consume. And it is a constant adjustment and readjustment. And so, if I say that to someone, they immediately think, oh, well, it's very complicated, I can't live like that, or whatever. But folks, the fact is that we do that every day when we get dressed. Like, if you wake up in the morning and it's 50 degrees, I wear different clothing than when it's 70 degrees.
That's right.
And if you do that with food too, that's just natural and how your body is made to work. And so if you had a very simple, easy language for that, just like the way we get dressed in the morning, then you see that Ayurveda offers a really simple model for making sure you feel good. and, and that's just really takes the edge off of many conditions, and just that alone. And then, of course, there's the deeper use of herbs um, and a more thoughtful, taking that. Sometimes you do want to spend a whole half an hour considering more deeply the kinds of things that would be an exact fit for a deeper condition or a deeper problem. And of course, that's what I do with clients, or when you see a practitioner, you may go a little deeper. So do you feel like that in the course that that the course kind of richly explained this whole method, or do you feel like you're coming out with big questions? I mean, there's always the more you know, the more questions you have, kind of thing. But tell me about that, what you learned in the program.
Sure. I think, for me, coming out of it, because I knowing that I have the background in medicine and particularly in GI, I thought it was very easy for me to understand. But I also think that you gave a lot of early on just anatomy, physiology.
Mm-hmm.
I was just, but I'm also thinking if perhaps, if you gave maybe a little bit more on that for people who don't have that as a background, I think it's helpful, just because in many of the conversations, I think, for those of us who've had, even the nutritionists understand it, because they deal with this, the anatomy and the physiology part of it a little bit more than someone, who may be into yoga or, more of a holistic sort of a practitioner without the medical background. I think for this course, I think getting that a little bit more might be
a little more in.
For me, it really didn't. I thought it was great. We went into it, and I understood, the small intestine, the large intestine, where things happen. So it was a very easy course for me in that respect. I think what was hard for me is, adapting to the Ayurvedic principle of dealing with different diseases. Are we doing certain things this way, or this? For me to think, it really made me think about, okay, this is not just the absorption that happens here. There's a lot more that happens when it goes into the liver, and the liver getting heated up, and how the liver is part of that, the pitta sort of disorder. And so that aspect was a little bit more challenging, but it was easy because I had the medical background.
Yeah, you can imagine the because Ayurveda is so much about interrelationships between things rather than the things itself, right?
Yes.
How is liver and small intestine interacting with each other is more the focus of Ayurveda than the small intestine and the liver as on its own, right? And so,
yes.
So you're dealing with you're studying relationships instead of parts. But how do you possibly know the relationships without knowing the parts, right? So there is an anatomical component, and as you said, we give an introduction to that. But students where that's unfamiliar to them, they may want to study some digestive anatomy before the course starts, or during the course, or buy a book in that, just to make sure that they can easily think about some of these principles. And I think every student will certainly come up with a challenge in one way or another through the program. There are some people who come into the program that have never haven't written a paper or an essay in 25 years, and they're thinking, how am I going to write a treatment protocol? And that that's a challenge to them. And so I do. I think every student will come up with a challenge to themselves in the program, and hopefully by the end of the program, you'll grow through that and feel like you have made it to the top of the mountain. Yes.
And I know this is a 10-month program, and I'm just throwing it out there. is,
Mhm.
whether there should be maybe a 2 month prior to starting the digestive thing is just go over anatomy and physiology,
Yeah.
just a
Hmm.
little bit more intensive. So it makes it easier, and maybe even the nuances of computer and getting all that thing
Yeah,
together.
there's a technological hurdle too to
Right.
an online program. It offers that flexibility, but also there's a technical, challenge just to build familiarity with it. And it's always, every year where, it takes us till about week 3, I think, or week 4 before people are really comfortable with all the technological components. And we've done things before where we do the technical stuff beforehand, and
Okay.
then we have 30% of the class signing up the day class starts.
Yeah.
And then we have that issue too. So, those are all the kinds of pieces that we're juggling. And so, what we've tried to do is bring in more student support so that students can reach out if they have a technical issue, and they can't get into the call, that there's some backup there, that they can get some help from
Yeah.
our student support staff. And then the teacher is not spending the whole class time trying to figure out how to get someone's sound working on Zoom. So those are all, the sort of devil in the details that we come up against every year in the program. And at the same time trying to stay focused on expressing that Ayurvedic, that richness of the Ayurvedic approach to digestion, dovetailing between those two. And it is a challenge. But hopefully people feel by the end of the program that they do have that familiarity with anatomy, that it's something that they've built over that time. And in the pre-course, if they have that time to study, then that would be great. Well, for you, what was the greatest challenge? Was it thinking about things Ayurvedically? What was that the greatest challenge,
No,
or,
I think for
or
me
what?
it was time management, John, because
Yeah.
I'm in practice as well, and so on the days when I was on call, and I would try to listen in when I'm at work, and then try to get homework done, or other
Yeah.
that for me was really challenging because it's
Yeah.
3 days a week, and plus at the time being on the West Coast, it was a time difference as well.
Yes.
So all that mattered. And for me, I think really it was work, managing work, and the challenge of being on call, flying across the country sometimes to practice, and also be on target with, the classes.
Yeah.
A lot of the time I would have to take those, listen to the recorded lectures later on, which was added stress over the weekend of, in addition to doing other things, having a family. Um, so I think that for me really was the biggest challenge, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Most of the people in our program have a practice. They have a family. They have a they and so they're juggling multiple things in their life. And an online program gives you that flexibility to study at 6 a.m. in the morning, so that you can do all those things. But it's a juggling act. It is a juggling act. And we counsel students in ways to make their time more efficient if they're concerned about that. But it's always the number one showstoppers for people who, that can really literally prevent them from graduating are time, money, support, right? If they don't have the money to pay tuition, or they don't have support from their community or others in their life, or if there's a strong time crunch that they have, then those are the things that can prevent graduation. And so in response to that, we try to have a flexible extension policy, frequent breaks where you can catch up, especially around holidays. So your family never has this sense that, that you disappeared, and
I like that as
yeah,
well. I like the fact the extension really worked for me. And, Kimberly was just awesome. Anytime I would email, like even now with the move, I haven't
yes,
done my consultation part of the homework I haven't done. I've put it off because the last month has been so hectic. And so it was nice to have that little, to email and say, listen, this is what I'm going through and I will do it, but it'll have to be at this point after that. At
Yeah.
one point, even the final exam, I didn't think I could take it. And Kimberly's like, Helen, just take it. Because if you pass, then you're great. You don't have to do it again.
Yes.
You don't have to postpone it. So, which I did, and I'm glad and I passed.
Yeah.
I'm glad I listened to her and I took it, and so I liked that because it wasn't very rigid. And it made it easier, I think, as you said, working full time and having a family and all the other challenges to be able to take this course.
Yeah. And everyone's in that boat. Even the teachers are in that boat. I have my 5th child is due August 6th.
Yeah, you said that.
So as teachers, we also, have busy lives. And so we know our students do as well. And we're constantly adjusting in order to make sure that everyone crosses the finish line and gets the support that they need and the flexibility that they need. We've had people take our course and they have a death in the family or something along those lines. And they may need a month or 2 months to wrap up an estate. That happened, actually. The person was executor of the estate, and it was, and they just it took 2 months to wrap everything up, and they jumped in. And even the course materials themselves, they're not sequential. We're going through the digestive tract sequentially, but you can learn about the colon even if you missed one presentation on the small intestine. And so it works for students to, if they need to jump out for a little bit and then come back in, they're not going to feel lost, or that it was somehow cumulative and they can't understand anything because they were gone for a few weeks. It actually isn't like that. And so we have that luxury of bringing that flexibility to the student. So, if I heard correctly, your vision for sharing what you learned in the course is in your practice. Are you going to advertise? How are you going to even tell the public about, or do you plan to tell the public that you're using Ayurveda, or are you just going to do it in your sessions with?
So again, I know after I spoke with you when we talked about business, ideas and models and so on and so forth. For me, because I have a medical license that I have to worry about, I have to figure out, since I'm in Pennsylvania right now, what the medical license will allow and not allow me to do.
Yeah.
And, I think integrative medicine has just exploded and expanded. And I know that there are a lot of major children's hospitals that now have alternative medicine as a clinic, as an opportunity for patients to be able to go. And so for me, I think that's what I would look to do. Whether it's going to be open up a smaller practice with integrative digestive approach, or maybe even look at larger centers that have integrative, medicine as part of the GI group or facility.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't gone that far, but I do know that I want to integrate both Ayurvedic and allopathic medicine together. I've dished out, suggestions in the past, but never had the full awareness and knowledge of what I've learned through this. And so now I feel much more comfortable being able to say, okay, this is what we're going to look at. Okay, we're going to treat this, but there's a whole other, for people who are open to it. And I think a lot more of that in the community now. The people are looking, especially with COVID and everything else, what can we do to strengthen our immune system? What can we do to improve our health? And maybe this is an opportunity for those. And yes, I'll be seeing them after they actually have the disease, but it'll be still nice to not just focus on the disease itself, but to focus on their overall health, their general well-being, which is what I'd like to do.
Yeah, and digestion has been part of the root of Ayurveda. Digestive health is part of, or you can almost even say the main tool of Ayurveda, and so its perspective is rich. It offers a total, another model that has, because of its focus, because Ayurveda has had such a focus for thousands of years on digestion, I think for a gastroenterologist particularly, they would particularly find the course interesting, particularly find it exciting, and that there's just new frontiers for them.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Very much so. I think I found every lecture that was given exciting. You know, it was very interesting. Like I particularly liked like the inflammatory bowel disease, you know, courses, the classes, the GERD, which I see a lot in my practice. You know, it was so, you know, that's the big change I think I have made in my own practice, is not to give acid blocking medication when kids come in with burping symptoms, because that's what we did in our GI clinic. Anyone who came in with some burp and belch and, you know, a little bit of upper abdominal pain, if it wasn't H. pylori, you gave them you know, an acid blocking medication. And
Yeah.
even parents were trained to think that way, because now when I tell them, look, you know, there's other things that we can do, the diet and so forth, not many of them were excited. They're like, isn't there any medicine you can give me, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I could easily write a prescription right now for you, but I want you to just take a few minutes and listen to what I'm saying, that so much more in that stomach and you don't need an acid blocking medication. So I think changing that thought process might take a little bit of time,
Yeah.
and can be a challenge. But that was the first change that I made, was with GERD, where I honestly, in the last 6 months, I haven't prescribed omeprazole to a single patient.
Yeah.
It's awesome, you know, which is
Why?
really,
So, and I don't mean to quiz you on the spot here, but why not give an acid blocker? Is there, you know, is there a particular reason why you don't want to give acid blockers anymore?
yeah. Well, I mean, some of the challenge was the Zantac thing that came out, and, you know, Zantac is now off the market. But even with acid and Ayurveda, you want acid for your digestion, you know,
Yeah.
and the burping is not necessarily. In fact, I remember the first class when you said, you know, the burping is not because you have so much acid, it's really the lack thereof, and
Yes.
food stagnating in your stomach. And you have to look at all these other things, and you got to kick up your diet, you know, your stomach digestion first before you even put food in there. Was such an eye-opening thing, because that's not what allopathic GI tells you.
And especially for children, I mean, the likelihood of them having a hiatal hernia or something is you know, less for children than for older folks. And so, if they're getting that acid reflux, then, you know, and that burping. In fact, my 3-year-old, she has those classic Vata signs of a little bit low acid in the stomach and that kind of thing. And so whenever I hear her do a little burp with food or whatever, I think right in the back of my head, okay, how can I shift how can I help her make sure that she's digesting the meal? And we might give her a simple glass of water to hydrate her an hour before the meal, or something along those lines, so that she can, you know, produce those enzymes that she needs. Her Vata body, you know, she's more interested in ballet than having a glass of water. And so we've got to slow her down a little bit,
Yes.
make sure that she isn't dehydrated so she can produce those enzymes. And so
Absolutely. That's what I've been telling my patients too. Warm glass of water first thing in the morning.
yeah.
You know, add the you know, the pinch of salt and the lemon to it. That's great. But even if you just have a warm glass of water, it'll work. So it shifted my thinking in the way I was trained to treat digestive disorders.
Yeah.
And you know, and when I looked for courses, this was over a year ago, and I was looking to do something in Ayurveda. Yours was the only one that just focused on digestion. And for me, that was really important, because I didn't want to really necessarily do a 2-year course in Ayurveda and have this as as the digestion as an integrative part of it.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to be an Ayurvedic general practitioner, if you will.
Yes.
My focus really was on digestion and nutrition. And so yours was the only one that I saw that had a reasonable time frame that focused just on nutrition and digestion. Whereas most of the other courses were a 2-year program of a general Ayurvedic practitioner kind of a course. So this was perfect for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. You have it's an opportunity to go deep into a subject because you're
Yes.
right. In a general course, you're going to talk about, you'll talk about principles of digestion. Will keep coming up over and over again. But in terms of specific digestive tract pathology, or even very specific discussion of anything going on in digestion, that may be 2 weeks of the whole 2 years. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, that's the focus of your whole practice. So,
Right.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Well, so would you recommend the course to other people?
Oh, absolutely, I would. I think that if you can overcome the challenges of time, as you said, constraints, the
Yeah.
money, and other things, I think it's a great program. Absolutely, I would recommend it.
Oh, great. Well,
Yeah,
thank
I'm glad
you.
that I went through it. I'm glad I'm coming to an end.
Uh-huh.
Um, but at the same time, as I'm coming to an end, I'm like, okay, I better start thinking about what's my next step and what I want to do. And unfortunately, I've moved at the same time, so I have a little bit of a break. But I'm thinking every day. I think, what do I want to do with my practice? Like even yesterday's class, when you were going over, what do people want to do and their business models and so on and so forth. I just felt like, okay, I'm not there yet because I just don't know if I want to be part of a large academic center, or
Yeah.
do I want to be like a freelance in a way? If someone says, hey, Helen, do you want to come and do a talk, or you want to do something here, just be able to do all of that, because it gives me a little bit of freedom with my own time, as well.
Yes.
I certainly would use and give suggestions, at least in terms of food and ways to manage digestive disorders now, as per Ayurvedic recommendations, in addition to just the allopathic ways that I was trained in, which
Yeah.
is really awesome.
Yeah. Well, great. So those are, how to bring these services to the public is, it is a question that students start asking as they graduate, and there is many ways to many different opportunities and ways to go in, whether it's educating people, private practice, or working as a part of a group. Those are all options that people are asking. I want to thank you again, Helen, for sharing your experience with people, both, some of the challenges you faced and what you got out of the course. That just helps prospective students enormously so that they know what to expect and can adapt or figure out the ways to handle those issues and do well in the program. So now about I know you recently moved, and you're probably going to be setting up practice in your area at some point. Where should people Google you? What town should they Google you in order to, if they want to find you and do a session with you? Is that something you're ready to share with them yet, or you want to wait a little longer?
Yeah, I'm in Pennsylvania, so I've reapplied actually to reactivate my Pennsylvania medical license.
Uh-huh.
And so the medical license, they'll find me, because
Okay.
there'll be an address on there.
Okay.
That it may be a PO box. I'm not sure just yet, but I'm just waiting because of COVID. I think it's taken much longer
Yeah.
to reactivate my Pennsylvania medical license. So you can look up any practitioner with that. So I
Okay.
be under my medical license here in Pennsylvania.
So then people would look up Dr. Helen John-Kelly.
Yes, John-Kelly. Yes.
John-Kelly. Okay, great. So, thank you again, and I'll see you in class.
Yes. Thanks, John. Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye.